Hello everyone. I'm going to talk about model view controller. Model view controller is a pattern where it's being using in the software design, but mostly in web applications, I think, but in some others as well. Model view controller is a pattern where you separate different into different sections your application. So creating it will be more easier, and also working with the codes of it will be more convenient. And I think also in some cases it's more safer than some other patterns. Why? Because its goal is the goal of the model view controller is splitting a large application into specific sections that all have their own purpose, like handling data in another section, in a separate section, and presenting that data in totally different section. And also there is one more section where the controller gets in, which is a kind of waiter or waitress, so it's a kind of middleman. So it's taking care of the interactions between where the data handled and also where the data going to be presented. So splitting into different sections, and different sections have their own purpose, and they do their tasks separately. And back in the days, websites were looking like this one, which is not so looking cool nowadays, but in those days it was cool. But it's pretty simple, some text, some pictures, and some links, and so on. It's very basic. But nowadays they evaluated into these ones, which are looking more cool and also more complex, creating them even more complex. So to get over this complexity, um, software programmers, applications creators, they are using model view controller method pattern in order to achieve this complexity. And what is model view controller and how it is working? Let's have a look. There is a user, and user enters a link URL into their address to the browser. Then the user sends a request to the web application, but this request reaches to the controller part of the web application in the model view controller pattern. In this pattern, the request handles by controller section. Then the controller section takes this request and it handles request flow. So it's just passing the request to the model, to view other parts, other sections of the pattern. It's just messenger. So then it takes this request from user to the model part, and it's asking for the data which user requested. Then the model is going to take care of the getting data logic, then handles the data logic, the model, and interacts with the database, and then gets the data, then passes this data to the controller. But controller never handles data logic. It doesn't care about how the data being passed or how it's handled. It's just asking and then getting data like this, then sending the data to the view section. So what does the view section is taking the data and then making it into a presentation where user can see the data in a nice way. So controller takes the data from model and then pass it to the view section. Then the view section will handle the data presentation, and then it's going to render this presentation dynamically. So controller will get back this presentation. Again, controller is not caring about how the data is presented or how it's going to work and so on. It's just taking the presentation from the view, then it is getting this presentation back to the user as a response. So user sends request and gets a response by these steps. But the thing is here is model and view never interacts between each other. And controller is not caring about how the data getting or what data is going to be get by the user or how it's going to be handled. It doesn't care about it. View also not getting touch into the model part, so it doesn't get the data directly from the database. So the controller is getting data from model and then passing it to the view. Then view will make it into a presentation and passing it to the controller. Then controller pass this presentation as a response to the user. Then user will see a nice website, web application on their screen. So let's have a look in a little bit concrete example. Not much, but a little bit. This logic how works. So the user asks for some docs images or some data about docs, then sends the request get docs. Then controller takes this request and passing it to the model get docs data. Then the model is going to handle the data part and then handling the data logic. For example, asking for to a database gets data about the dogs and then passing this data to the controller back. Then controller will take this data. So if it's a success situation, then the data is going to be sent to the view. So the view will get docs data from the controller, then makes it into a presentation like this. So then passing it to the controller back again, then controller takes this as a response to user, then the user will see data about dogs on their screen. But in case of error occurred in the data handling section, so the data is not going to be a successful data, so it's going to be an error from the model. The model will pass the data to the controller and the controller part will send the error to the view section. Then the view section is going to make this error into a presentation, then will pass back to the controller and controller is going to send this error as a response to the user. Then user will see the error on their screen. So the important thing is not to about this design is that model and view never interact with each other. So the data handled in a totally separate place and presentation of that data is done by totally different place. And any interactions between the model and the view are done through the controller. So the controller taking care of the interactions between model and view. So the tasks are separated. And having the controller between the model and view means that the presentation of data and the logic of data are completely separated, which makes creating complex apps, complex applications much easier. And I believe also safer than the having all the things done in just one section.